Right in eastern Washington lies a strange hole. Mel's Hole, a seemingly bottomless pit wrapped in mystery. Discovered by local resident Mel Waters, this hole has led to a series of unsettling discoveries and inexplicable events that defy logical explanations. Recently, a drone was lowered into its depths only to capture eerie images, leaving even the most experienced scientists perplexed. What is happening on our planet? What's this mysterious hole? Join us as we delve into the mind-blowing story of Mel's Hole and the terrifying secrets hidden within its dark depths. Jay Nickel, a 34-year-old man who spent all his life in Ellensburg, said a hole exists about 7 miles from Mannock Ridge. He recounted that he and his friend rode bikes around the area. According to him, it doesn't make any sound when they hurl rocks down the hole. This sounds like what Mel Waters would later mention in his whole description. Then came Rodney, who worked at a snowmobile dealership in town. According to him, the story of a hole in the ridge had been common for decades, but he had never seen it. Mel Waters, a man searching for tranquility, is drawn into a mystery, seeking a quiet and solitary place to live. He purchases a property in Manastash Ridge and settles there with his wife. Little does he know that a few meters from his new home lies a mysterious hole seemingly decades old, waiting to be discovered, according to Mel's description. This wasn't an ordinary hole. It has a large circular shape and is about 9 feet wide, encircled by a stone wall, after about 15 feet. All that you would see is complete darkness for years. The hole had been the dumping site for Mel's neighbours. When Mel found it, he said he and his wife also disposed of trash. However, this hole never fills up. It keeps taking the trash, but still has space for more. Mel became curious. One of the hole's most perplexing aspects is its silence when objects are thrown into it. There is no echo, no indication that they have reached the bottom to probe this enigma. Mel, drawing on his skills as a fisherman, decided to measure the depth of the hole. He attached a 1 pb weight to a fishing line and lowered it into the pit. Astonishingly, after 4,500 feet of line, the weight had still not touched the bottom. Mel was not bothered. He was bent on knowing the hole's depth, so he pushed the line back up and attached a lifesaver candy to it. This was to know if there was water in the hole. He released the lifesavers, but they were dry when he pulled them back up. This experiment showed that there was no water in the hole. Then Mel attached more lines to the fishing line and let them down into the hole. He did this until he had used up to 10,000 feet of line, yet there's no bottom in sight. He continued until he had used up to 880,000 feet of lines, yet there's no bottom. Mel couldn't keep his discovery to himself, so he decided to tell the world about the mysterious hole in his backyard. Could this be what led the government to the site and the subsequent use of drones in the hole? Keep watching to find out. Mel thought of the best place to go to tell the world about his discovery. Then he stumbled upon Art Bell's radio program. Why had he chosen this among others? First, you need to know about Bell, and his show Bell was a well-known broadcaster. Unfortunately, he had passed away. He was best remembered for his Coast to Coast AM radio program. This program became popular due to its examination of unusual objects, conspiracy theories, and paranormal events. Late-night programming on Coast to Coast AM began at approximately 10:10 or 11 p.m. and continued into dawn, concluding at roughly 4. AM Bell's engrossing storyline and dynamic hosting manner enhanced the program. Bell's program explored various topics, including cryptid, alternative medicine, government cover-ups, ghosts, and UFOs. In addition, he offered a forum where visitors, professionals, and phone users could exchange views, opinions, and conversations about these outlandish subjects. Bell's show attracted listeners looking for unusual and thought-provoking content, building a community of people fascinated by out-of-the-world discoveries. Thus, Melot knew this was the perfect show for him. Therefore, on the 21st of February 1997, Mel sent a message to Art Bell. Perhaps the content detailed all that he saw because Bell gave him a call. Quickly, they had a phone chat, and Mel attended a show for the first time. Mel made his first appearance on the show and detailed all that he had seen and heard. Soon everyone began to talk about the hole during the show. Some advised Mel to use special light beams to see the depth of the hole, and some said he should use radar to see the ground. But then Mel had more to say about the pit. Aside from the strangeness of its depth, Mel reported that animals stirred clear of the hole. They don't want to move near it at all. They always act as if something frightens them from the hole. He also detected that odd and unclear signals affect his radio. Whenever he nears the hole, there was an occasion when his radio started playing some tunes that had reigned decades ago. When he tried to change the station, he discovered that it only changed to a 1967 baseball game. This was more than 30 years ago. The area around the hole is always silent, like a graveyard. But then while animals stir clear of it, plants seem to have no problem at all. Mel also said that he was not the only one who noticed the bizarre attitude of animals. Toward the hole, his neighbors said that their dogs also act the same way as they discussed it. Another neighbor told a short story that added to the mysteries rounding the hole. Now sit tight. The man said he had a dog that he loved so much. Unfortunately, the dog died. Well, what happened after that, out of grief and compassion for the dog, he didn't want to bury it. Instead, he decided to put the carcass into the hole. But after a few days, the man said he saw the same dog running in the forest. What could this be true? The man said he had called the dog, but it hadn't answered. The dog only kept running as if something was after it. Can we then say Mel's hole has a strange power to bring the dead back to life? Or how best do we explain the mystery behind the resurrection of a dead dog in a hole? Just as this neighbor finished his story, one of his neighbors told him that he saw a dark beam of light emanating from the hole into the clouds. He described it as scary and out of the norm. Though he admitted to not seeing the light himself, listeners on the show had something to back it up. They said that Manish Ridge was famous for all sorts of weird events. They said that people had seen UFOs. Some had disappeared, and other bizarre events had happened there. Some even opined that the hole must be on a ley line, which they believed was an invisible energy across the earth. To some, the hole was a way to another dimension. They believed that someone was storing the trash animals and all that had been thrown into the hole. However, this was a hoax. If someone was truly down there, he would have grabbed Mel's fishing line and the dead dog wouldn't have resurrected. And if it were true, could he be a super-empowered man? Could he have given life to the animal, kept the stuff thrown into the hole, and played around with Mel's fishing line? Well, we can only imagine one of the listeners even volunteered to enter the hole, but Mel and others discarded the idea. A drone was thrown into the hole, and something strange was seen. What could this be? Stick with me a little more. We'll get there shortly after Mel appeared on the show. Reports of strange sightings, atmospheric disturbances, and other unexplainable occurrences enhanced the story of the hole. Despite investigations, there are no conclusive answers to these incidents, making it even scarier. But then it seems Mel attracted the government with his mysterious tale. 4 days after the show, armed military troops suddenly blocked the road leading to his home. More surprising was that the soldiers didn't allow him to enter his land. This startled him, and when he asked for an explanation, he received a confusing reply. The soldiers said there had been an aircraft accident on the land. However, Mel had not noticed anything similar. There were no outward indications of the incident, such as smoke or debris. Mel tried to interact with the authorities by requesting to talk with a higher-ranking official, but he was met with ambiguous and intimidating answers when he insisted on knowing what was happening. Because after all, this was his territory, they threatened him, saying they might discover evidence of his guilt, like a drug lab on the land. Mel responded that he would make all this public. But the cop laughed it off. Mel tried to seek clarification and reason with the authorities, but the situation remained secretive. After this event, Mel appeared again on Bell's show and recounted what he had experienced. A caller cleared the mist surrounding the sudden appearance of soldiers. The caller said Mel's property was close to the Yakima Training Center, a government facility which could have triggered the military's appearance. But after this occurrence, Art Bell tried to call Mel to the show again. However, he couldn't connect with him. Nobody knew what happened. He literally disappeared. What had happened to Mel was the end of the story. No, but before I continue, here is another strange event around the hole. After the government interference, airplanes were not allowed to fly over Mel's land again then, on a website that shows a satellite picture of the Earth. The area around Mel's hole was a black square. Some believed Mel saw the black square online and decided to build an intriguing story around it. But here's the twist. The website showing the black square started 6 months after Mel announced the hole to the world. This debunked the fact that he made up the whole story around it. But why a plane stopped from flying over the whole area? Could this be linked to what the drone found in the hole? Well, keep watching to find out. After 2 years, Mel unexpectedly returned to Bell's show. Where had he been hiding? Mel had a new tale to tell 3 years earlier. He was caught up in an odd chain of circumstances when he was supposed to make his 3rd appearance on the radio show. After assisting his nephew with moving into an apartment, he caught a bus back to Olympia. However, transit authorities stopped the bus due to a fight. Among the passengers, he alighted from the bus, and after being escorted onto a different bus, along with others, he passed out. He had no idea of what befell him. Subsequently, he discovered himself in a San Francisco dirt alley. He later discovered that he had been there for the past 12 days. In addition to having an IV line in his arm for no apparent reason, his personal belongings were gone. 3 of his molars were missing, and he could taste blood in his mouth. Mel then contacted his nephew to ask for assistance, getting back to Olympia. But there's more trouble. He checked his account balance and discovered that all his money was gone. Then the government broadcast that he had built houses, roads and the like, while he didn't do any of this. After that, he was offered an amazing offer, a lifelong lease on his land, in return for a substantial monthly payment of $3 million. But there's a condition: he had to move somewhere else and keep quiet about the pit. Thus, Mel took the money and moved to Australia. But right now, Mel had decided to go against the agreement. He was ready to spill out everything that had happened to him. But that's not all. He had new stories to tell. And guess it's about a second hole. Mel first came on the show and told the tale of a rare dime. The dime has an image of President Roosevelt inscribed in 1943. This was an anomaly, though, because there was no dame, with the image of Roosevelt that year, the coin's mint mark, which typically indicates where it was made, further complicated matters. This dime was unusual because it included B, an odd detail, given that no city connected to the minting of American currency had ever been named after a letter Mel sent it to a professional coin appraiser. But when he checked in again a few days later, the appraiser claimed that the Treasury Department had claimed the coin. But why would they act in that way? There are many different explanations and speculative ideas regarding this unusual coin. According to some theories, the coin can be connected to Mel's hole-related extraterrestrial occurrences. Speculative factors surround Mel's hole, including stories of time distortions connected to the location. People who have reported seeing strange Tim-related phenomena near the purported location have detailed these events. A few people said they had noticed irregularities connected to time close to the hole. These legends commonly claimed time dilation, in which time appeared to move more slowly than usual, or incidents of clocks or other timekeeping devices supposedly malfunctioning randomly, while some described missing time instances where they could not account for a portion of their experiences. Others claimed to have seen odd oscillations. Over time, several explanations have been proposed for these purported time-related events connected to Mel's hole theories, regarding how gravitational anomalies could produce time dilation effects, and interdimensional rifts were among the theories floated. However, without hard scientific proof or thorough research, these occurrences and speculations are still only conjectural elements connected to to the mystery of Mel's hole. As per the DM, Mel had a different story to tell, and this led to the revelation of the second hole. He said that a Native American tribe from Nevada reached out to him. They've heard about his first hole, and surprisingly, they have a hole around them as well. So they called on Mel to see if he could help unravel the mystery, since he had experienced a similar circumstance. So Mel went to Nevada to explore another mystery. First, they took him aside and questioned him about the first hole. Then they took him to the location of the second hole. Like the first hole, the question on everyone's mind was, what lies beneath this hole? This second hole wasn't on Native American land, but in a public. The Basque are a tribe that came to Nevada in the 1800s to her sheep. The Basque said that the hold has been there for at least 200 years, but the Basque were more careful. They didn't dispose of dirt in the hole. Instead, they saw the hole and its environment as a sacred place. The hole was the same width as Mel's first hole, around 9 feet wide, but instead of a stone wall around the edge, this hole had a metal ring around it. Aside from all these, the hole has something more spectacular. Mel discovered that the hole felt warm. When he accidentally dropped a metal near the ring, it crashed. This was unusual. Metals ought to make a striking sound when they meet. But that wasn't the case with the second hold. You would think that's all to the mystery, but that's not it. Mel and the Basques decided to carry out some experiments. They want to know what it looks like to be in the hole. So first they lowered a butt filled with ice into the hole and kept some ice at the top to see the reaction from the two. When the ice on top melted, they pulled out the ice in the hole. To their utter dismay, the ice didn't melt at all and wasn't cold anymore. Instead, it was dry like white chalks. They then decided to melt the ice with fire. The result was unbelievable. The ice caught fire and kept burning for months. However, when they repeated the experiment, the results were inconsistent. Thus, they couldn't lay their hands on a particular theory. One of the men then volunteered to enter the hole. At least to see what was there, he stood by the hole and was about to step in when Mel and others screamed out that wasn't a good idea, considering the heat coming from the hole. Therefore, instead of doing that, they decided on another plan. They decided to lower a sheep into the hole and see what happens. Just like the first hole, animals are wary of this hole. They chide away from it as if something frightens them. So this sacrificial sheep, so to say, wasn't willing to enter the hole. Therefore it struggled vehemently with the people, but they had made up their minds. So they hit the sheep in the eye and threw it into a box. The sheep struggled in the box as they laid it into the hole. As soon as it entered the hole at close to 1,000 foot, the sheep stopped struggling. The box wasn't moving. Perhaps the sheep had decided to adapt to the heat, but that wasn't the case. Everything around them felt strange. They left the sheep in the hole for about 30 minutes and then moved it out. Everything looked normal until they opened the box. They discovered that the sheep wasn't moving again. It had died. Everyone stood in shock. The man who volunteered to go down couldn't believe his eyes. The Basque then decided to open the sheep to see what had happened. Inside, they were not expecting what they found. First, it looked like the sheep was fried. Then they saw a huge lump-like tumor inside it. Then the tumor began to move on its own. They summoned courage and opened the tumor. They saw something like a baby seal. It was connected to the tumor with a cord, like that of a mother to a child. However, it didn't look like an animal because it had the eyes of a human. The creature moved to the edge of the hole and made gestures that showed it wanted to return to the hole. Mel moved close to it and placed it near the hole. The creature looked at Mel for a few hours, then jumped into the hole. One of the Basques decided to move with some of the burning ice to keep his cabin cool, but was this a good decision? You will soon find out. Mel left Nevada, but unknown to him, the creature had cured him of a serious cancer in his throat. Before traveling down, his doctor told him that he had a limited chance to live. But when he returned, he wasn't sick anymore. Thus, the second hole seems to have a kind of healing property. This is somehow related to the first hole that brought a dead dog back to life. This short story captivated the hearts of everyone listening that night. But that's not the end of the story. Mel returned to the show a few months later and told the listeners about the man who went home with some of the burning ice. He wanted to stay warm with the ice, but the ice had more plans. He brought ice into his cabin, and the fire kept burning. But then the man noticed that the ice had started pulling moisture from everything around it. The man's skin dried up, and he was always thirsty when he tried boiling water. He discovered the ice somehow dried up the steam. Then he returned one day to meet a destroyed cabin. Not only that the cabin had turned to dust, surprisingly, this ice was still burning. Then he noticed that the stove where he kept the ice had fallen into the ground, and on a closer look he discovered that the burning ice was forming a new hole. They tried to pull out the hole, but they couldn't do it alone. Eventually they had to use a huge crane to do it. In addition, something magical or spiritual had been happening around the second hole. The Basque discovered that the creature came up once in a while and communicated with them through beeps and clicks from the radio. He had somehow connected to them through some strange and powerful energy. Emanating from the hole, they had developed a spiritual bond with the creature. Then they noticed that brightly coloured birds had started appearing near the hole. Nothing could hurt or scare them, to the Basque. This was nothing to be scared of. They saw it as a blessing from the creature. Mel's narration was too real to be true. So Bell asked if Mel could get photos and videos. Mel replied that he would get all that when he visited Nevada again. Thus the show ended with promises of more to come. However, there was no other episode. Mel stopped responding to Art's messages, and his phone was off. Nobody heard from him again, so what should we believe about the whole story? Does the first hole exist at all? Did he make up the second hole story to cover the first? But then a drone was lowered into Mel's hole, only to uncover something shockingly terrible. Eager to know what it was, then stick with the video until the end. Chapter 5, The Search for Mel's Hole. Well, some people chose to believe that Mel's hole was real, so they began following Mel's description in the hope of locating the hole. But then, is it real? A geologist named Jack Powell of Ellensburg was among those listening during one of the earliest Coco to Coast AM shows with Mel Waters Powell, who has worked as an exploratory geologist for petroleum companies, taught geology at CWU for 11 years, and worked with the DNR for over 20 years. Thought he knew where the hole was as a kid. He grew up in the Kars Valley and played around an old gold mine shaft that went down at an angle into a field northwest of Ellensburg. Powell estimated that the shaft on the valley floor was likely 90 feet deep or more. It may have been as much as 300 feet deep when it was an active mine. When Powell heard on the radio show that Mel's hole was said to be on Manor Ridge and more than 880,000 feet deep, he couldn't listen any longer. He knew the deepest mine shaft in the world was 12,672 feet deep, and the deepest known cavern was 718.8 feet. The Russians drilled the deepest borehole down 4,230 feet. In 1989, Powell noted that the hole he knew must be what Mel changed into a mysterious hole. He had 30 years of experience in the geology of eastern Washington, especially Lower Coos County and Manastash Ridge. Powell noted that geologically and physically, having such a deep hole is impossible according to him. It would collapse into itself under the tremendous pressure and heat from the surrounding layer. He concluded that Mel Waters must be talking about the whole northwest of Ellensburg on private property, fenced with barbed wire, and not too far from state DNR lands. He believed Mel used this hole to build a story around his mysterious hole on Manastash Ridge. However, in 2001, Seattle area discussion group members studying Mel's hole contacted Powell why they wanted access to geological information and to research Mel's hole to them. The Mel's hole exists. The group visited him, and he gave them a thorough lecture on the Manastash Ridge geology. He then LED'd them to the old M shaft and told them it inspired the mythical Mel's Hole. The hole on Manastash Ridge doesn't exist. He said, however, the group didn't leave the possibility of finding Mel's Hole. They later formed a group known as the Paranormal Society. Among the searchers bundled up for cold weather were a physicist, a father and son from Seattle, 3 Los Angeles amateur filmmakers, a family from Enumclaw, members of a Vancouver, BC-based paranormal investigation team, and a shaman known as Red Elk. The group struck out from the Copper Kettle toward Manosh Ridge, the site Waters had mentioned on the radio. Mel's Hole, they believe, could be a massive lava tube, or what Leave calls a Mount Rainier blowhole. But Pat Pringle, a geologist with the State Department of Natural Resources, said the area's landscape formed more than 12 million years ago by a volcan IIC Lahar. Makes a hole of such depth. Unlikely, he admitted, that odd things exist in nature, but doubts a hole like Mel's is possible in the brittle volcanic rock near here. Even if it is, he's sure the heat of the Earth would snap a fishing line long before it reached 80,000 feet. Leave, though, remained convinced that Mel's Hole would be a great find and possibly a sign of great danger. According to her, every geologist in the world ought to find Mel's Hole. So if you are a geologist out there but have not attempted to find the hole, you're not a geologist. Yet the searchers came prepared, carrying maps and metal detectors. One had a global positioning system, reader as they hiked up the trail. Red Elk, the shaman, assumed the lead. He said he'd seen the hole in 1961. Red Elk is a Native American shaman, or medicine man, who claimed his father showed him the hole in 1961. According to him, it's an endless hole, and strange things happen when you go near it. He even nicknamed it the Devil's Hole. He also said that the government has a secret base there, Chapter 7, the search of very small underground base, and that he had seen alien activity around the area. He described a huge spacecraft appearing and hovering over the hole. During the summer solstice, he said spacemen load and unload things at the hole before flying away. No one could vet his explanation because he was his own witness. No one else saw it. The party listened to him but still continued their search. Betsy Wise of California walked with a metal detector slung on her back. She suffered from migraines and hoped to find an answer to the headaches out here. After all, Mel said the hole has some magical abilities. Others were drawn by a more spiritual impulse, viewing the hole as a clue to how the universe is ordered. After 10 minutes, the group reached a cattle gate where slash piles and clear-cut ridges defined the landscape. Red Elk wore a pouch around his neck containing a $50-sized piece of squashed peor. He said the object found in the middle of a road was from a UFO. He said the place to search was a jumble of tree limbs and stumps off to the right. He then told them to dig in while he took a break. A few people scrambled over to the pile. While others milled about, they discussed how to measure gases leaking from the Earth through the hole, argued over whether a mass spectrometer, a frightfully expensive machine that measures ions, would help, and lamented not bringing a Gurr counter. Sean Kennedy of the Paranormal Amateur at Research Association in Vancouver, BC, checked the coordinates on his GPS receiver inspired by Ghostbusters to plumb the unexplained. He considers searches like this a hobby up on the ridge. The search was bogging down. Red Elk had long since given up, preferring instead to lecture on a world called Inner Earth. Beneath the surface, Tim Wee of Auburn, the resident skeptic on the expedition, doubts there is a Mel's Hole. The others, he said, are too quick to accept Waters' story. Eventually, he exclaimed that the search wasn't scientific. He called it an adult cartoon. But back at their base camp, one of the searchers saw something intriguing. An offshoot of the party drove farther down the road and stopped at an old driveway with a chain between 2 sagging posts. The area seemed promising, as one of them screamed that the hole would be there. Thus, they decided to embark on another search of the mysterious hole. Ask a scientist about Mel's Hole and you'll likely be laughed at. But the people searching for Mel's Hole don't expect everyone to believe them. They're used to being called crazy for Los Angeles filmmaker Buddy Bolton. At least what the public thinks is hardly the point he called it, an exploration of faith, and believed there was a touch of reality to it at the Northwest Museum of Legends, and lore Phil Lipson said he's heard the stories and believed a hole exists. However, he had never seen the hole. Even though he had also LED'd an expedition to find it, he believed it was a true event, but never uncovered it. What then should be our conclusion? After all, a rumour says that a drone entered the hole and found something strange. Could that be false? Well, here's another search party side of the story. In 2017, paranormal enthusiasts and people fascinated by Mel's hole teamed up with GoPro cameras, lights and strings in hand in hopes of catching a glance into the abyss. Suddenly they were led by coordinates from a Reddit thread to a random farm that might be connected to Mel's hole. When they arrived, they were met with the sheer depth of the chasm, which defied the explanation. They threw rocks, since they could not figure out the bottom, which increased the mystery around this fabled hole. The group used binoculars to see a mysterious person watching them from a distance. But before carefully reviewing the video they had taken, they felt compelled to leave. Immediately, later on, the group found a beetle in the enormous hole. But then this doesn't look enthralling, like what Mel said about his hole. Thus, Mel M's hole has not been found. Scientists, geologists, and enthusiasts are still looking for the mysterious hole. It turned out that no drone was thrown into the hole. It was a rumor. After all, it's not real. Here's a final shock. There's no record of Mel Waters living in Ellensburg. Could he have then been fooling the world? Well, we can only wait. Thanks for watching another episode of SkyScience while you're still here. Check out the other videos you see on your screen.